Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
As little as long ago, or as far away as forever. This is where we meet to celebrate what never was, as it comes to pass. All right, let me see. Doug, are you there, brother? Can you hear me at all? Okay. We have with us as guest this evening Douglas Elwell, who's going to be speaking about um, the release of his latest book. But he seems to be having some issues with his mic, so as soon as we get that resolved, but in the interim, I'll just kind of, give you some current events and everything. I'm going to get him to call back in, and then hopefully he'll be able to hear us. Doug, you there? Okay, but anyways, for those that don't know, Doug is also the author of Planet X. I forget the exact name of the book. The Star of the Lord. Really excellent book, and it talks about a lot of the Sumerian mythologies and the things that I've talked about in covering the timeline of creation. Let me see. Let me tell him to reboot his mic here real quick, and then we'll see if we can get this going. Okay. All right, he's going to set up the new mic. And then if not, I'll just call him by his house number because we've got that as a backup as well. So, but we'll give him just a few minutes. But anyways, Planet X, the Sign of the Son of Man is the name of that book. And Doug and we've done a number of different shows, but specifically that one covers the, as far as the return of whatever Planet X may be, and its interactions with the Earth, and how it might have possibly led to several occurrences, like even the flood of Noah's day, and possibly that of the repercussions with surrounding the Exodus, and also with the signs that were found in the heavens during the crucifixion, possibly even.
Hello, testing.
Hey there, Doug. Hey, how are you, brother?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, man. And I'm glad that you were able to get that situated. But I was just telling the listening audience about your previous book, and the latest one is going to be on giants. And so, do you have a title for that one yet? And do you have a tentative release date?
The title I'm going to keep hidden for now because it's I don't want people to know it quite yet.
Sure.
It's going to be basically about the giants, based on my original articles on Mysterious World, with a lot more added on, extended, doing what I wanted to write about originally but didn't have time.
Mm-hmm.
Plus an extensive prologue talking about the fall of Lucifer and the creation of the universe, which I believe was actually a result of the fall of Lucifer.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Sounds good.
And the creation of the giants and his ongoing war with God.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. That's one of my focuses as far as the ongoing war. This bloodline war, and the whole how the war in heaven led to the enmity between the seed lines, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and how we see that reflected as the division of the goat and the tares, and the goat and the sheep, and the wheat and the tares, and the good and the bad figs. You see this reflected all throughout Scripture. This war between these two groups of people, but basically the children of perdition and the children of light, the sons of light and the sons of darkness, as the Dead Sea Scrolls, one of those particular books. But um, so are you near as far as publication? Because I know you've been working on this, and also for those that don't know, you can find a lot of articles that Doug has written on the giants, the topic of the giants, on the Mysterious World website. And so there's a lot of really extensive information there about the different groups of giants, and as far as the regional areas here on the earth. But can you also give out the website, Doug, and where people can go to find your work, and to if you want to share any contact information?
Yes, the website is mysteriousworld.com. You can contact me by email at publisher@mysteriousworld.com. We also have a Facebook page in Facebook, Mysterious World. There's a couple of ripoffs there, but the real one is just type in Mysterious World in the search box, and I should have the Mysterious World logo appear on the left side, which is a globe of the world with the words mysterious on top and the world on beneath the globe. And also, I have a site called Planet X at planet-x.info. That's planet-x.info, where you can learn about my book on Planet X.
Yeah, excellent. And that, I was telling people about that book and its connections to, the destroyer, and what the Colburn Bible references of the destroyer, and so that's also very interesting. And what can you just tell the listening audience kind of a summary of that particular book, um, and the contents, what it's about?
Sure. Planet X, it's called Planet X, the Sign of the Son of Man and the End of the Age. The title is taken from the phrase, I think in the King James, maybe the NIV, in Matthew 24:30, when the disciples were talking with Jesus on top of Mount of Olives, which is called the Olivet Discourse. And they asked him at the beginning of the chapter 24 of Matthew, and it's also, I think, in one or more other books of the Gospels. They asked him, what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? And he goes through a litany in order of the end times events from beginning to end. And near the end of the end times events, he says in Matthew 24:30, there shall appear a sign in the heaven, which will be a sign of the end of the age and my imminent return. So my goal was to figure out what was the sign, because I was looking for signs of Jesus' return, pretty much disgusted with the state of affairs in the world and wanting a change I could believe in. I wanted Jesus to return and initiate permanent change. And so I was looking forward to a second coming. Now, I looked for signs of the second coming, imminent portents. I read the book of Revelation, book of Daniel, other books, and just wanted to see what will be a sign, a clear sign of a second coming, above and beyond the various books that were written, all of which proved to be wrong. And I came across a passage in Matthew 24:30 saying this heavenly sign will appear right before second coming. So I was like, okay, what could this heavenly sign be? I originally and still do correlated with the Star of Bethlehem, which preceded his first coming. I figured, well, maybe he's regularly preceded by the same sign, which is kind of his logo, his symbol, and precedes his coming not only in the first time, but in his return in the future. And so I looked at the Star of Bethlehem and said, okay, could this be a star, a comet, or a conjunction of planets? And I went through each of the individual possibilities, and each of them had their pluses, but mainly minuses, because novas only last maybe a couple of days, where they're really, really bright supernovas. Then one of the primary theories is that it was a supernova, but they only last a few days. And the Magi would have taken weeks to travel from, if not months, to travel from Persia to Israel, ancient Palestine. So that was not going to work. A comet was a possibility, but comets tended to be portents of disasters and not of beneficial things like the birth of the Son of God. And of course, conjunctions of planets happen all the time and are not particularly special. And conjunctions usually last only for a couple of days. And so that wouldn't have worked, because the Magi couldn't have followed it for weeks or months if it only lasted for a couple of days. So I wasn't really satisfied with the major theories or any of the theories. So I kept looking. As I expanded my scope of my research, I started looking at more esoteric literature, fringy stuff, looking for examples of what could, maybe these people have understanding of ancient history, because the Magi were actually ancient idolaters and magicians, occultists, which made their inclusion in the story particularly interesting, because even the dark side was giving homage to this king, so it must have been a pretty incredible event. And one of the traditions I found was written by a guy named Zechariah Sitchin, a book called The 12th Planet. And whereas I found his theories not very plausible, his idea about Planet X I thought was interesting, and it fit the criteria of the object that would appear as fit the requirements for the Star of Bethlehem event mentioned in Matthew 2. And so he said it was a mainstream scientific theory, so I checked up on that. And I found it is correct that Planet X was a mainstream scientific theory that had been around since the 1800s. And Planet X itself had been seriously searched for by legitimate astronomers for over a century, even by the time that he even written this book, which was in 1976. And back in the 1980s, when I was doing my research, late 1980s, there was a huge flurry of speculation about the existence of Planet X, because the Voyager probes had passed past the outer planets, Uranus and Neptune, and found them in such disarray. It was kind of a disaster area, that they had speculated that Planet X, a Planet X-like object, must have been responsible for this disarray, because only a massive object could have screwed up their satellites and tilted them on their sides. For example, planet Uranus has a south pole currently pointing directly at the sun, and its polar and magnetic axes are really, really misaligned with each other. It would be as if the North Magnetic Pole were somewhere in Texas for Earth. It's really, really off. And they deduced, based on this and the strange orbits of their satellites, and the fact they deduced also that Pluto was actually an escaped satellite of Neptune. The only way this could happen is if a massive object, roughly 3 to 5 times the mass of Earth, had passed by these planets passing through our outer solar system. And so the Planet X theory was powerfully reconfirmed. It was happening right as I was doing my research of Planet X, so that motivated me to do additional research, and I found more and more that not only does Planet X clearly does it clearly exist, it has to, according to the evidence, it's incontrovertible, but it also answers many of the questions about not only the second coming of Christ, because I believe that was not only the Star of Bethlehem, but also the sign of the Son of Man at the end of the age, described in Matthew 24:30. But it was also present at the creation. So it was present in the creation, nativity, and end times. Thus the subtitle of my book, Planet X, the sign of the Son of Man in the end of the age, subtitled Planet X at the creation, nativity, and end times. It comes around once every 2,000 years or so to cause either disasters or various great things. The last time it passed by us, Jesus was born, and it appeared as the herald of his first coming. Next time it'll come as the herald of his second coming, but this time it will bring disaster. And that is the essential thesis of my book.
Excellent, excellent. Well, in connection to your book, and you know how Christ, when he first came, he fulfilled the first spring and summer feasts of the Leviticus 23 feasts. You know what I'm talking about?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I was just gonna ask you. Well, anyways, when he first came, he fulfilled the first four feasts of the Most High God as laid out in Leviticus chapter 23. Like he was um, crucified on Passover and then entombed on the day of unleavened bread, the feast of unleavened bread, and then he was resurrected for the day of first fruits, which are the first spring feast, and then 50 days after, on the day of Pentecost, when Moses received the Torah and the law, the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai. This is also when the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, came upon the apostles, and they were found speaking in tongues, and they were understood by all the different people from all the different nations of the world. But anyways, in his return, he is, according to the feast, it should align, and he should fulfill the three remaining fall feasts, which are the Feast of Trumpets and the Day of Atonement and the Feast of Tabernacles. And so, because you don't know about it, I won't be able to ask you about it. But what is your do you follow at all the Levitical feasts, and like, Passover is coming up on this upcoming Saturday? I didn't know, what did you think about the feasts, and
That
do you
makes a lot.
recognize them at all?
That makes a lot of sense. I haven't studied Jesus' life in terms of the Levitical feasts per se, but what you said makes a lot of sense. I mean, he came to fulfill the law and the prophets,
Right.
and that's part of the important part of the law, are the feast days. So I
Yeah.
do believe Jesus' entire life was a one long ritual where he was
Right.
fulfilling the entire law piece by piece, and you could probably find every part of the law fulfilled in some part of his life.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you a chapter that I wrote in my latest book, which talks about the feasts and everything, because according to, the his second coming, and in my opinion, the feast will be in connected to the the calling up, the catching away. That this will fall on the Feast of Trumpets, and then when he takes and assumes the judgment seat, and every knee shall bow, every tongue confess, that will fulfill the Day of Atonement. And then when the New Jerusalem descends, and the righteous and those that are counted as among and numbered among the elect, are allowed to enter into New Jerusalem, that will begin the millennial reign, and that's how the fall feast will be fulfilled by his second coming. But anyways, and so, why don't you go ahead and lay the foundation for your next book, and the where you want to lead the discussion as far as giants, because this is a totally interesting subject, and one that has a lot of people now investigating and looking into. And so I'm curious as to how you're bringing forth, and what you are writing about in specific with your upcoming project.
Okay. Yeah, this has been a long-term project of mine. It's been kind of slowly growing in the back of my mind, trying to figure out the idea of good and evil, how good and how evil could be created, why it was created, why it exists. I believe God is a God of ultimate order and purpose, and does nothing by accident. And He's actually totally in control of everything, even though it's impossible for us to understand it. Unlike that, I believe everything is predefined. You're probably familiar with the movie The Matrix, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And people use that analogy ad nauseum, but allow me to do it one more time. Is that in order to fool humanity into thinking that they had free will, the Matrix, that is the architect, had to put in the illusion of choice. And that's why they created the program known as the Oracle, which let them think that they were able to choose, but whereas they were not able to choose, they created an illusion of randomness, so that let them think they had choice, but the end was always going to be the same. And so they always end up with another chosen one at the end of a certain cycle, and he ends up making a choice, and that isn't really a choice, or he's maybe the only person who can make a choice. And so I think that's the way the universe actually is. When Satan fell, he did so because the Father wanted him to do, because it was part of his larger plan. Satan did not fall because he cannot fall theologically, because that would mean God was not all powerful. And so it creates a conundrum, a contradiction theologically, which people who attack the Bible routinely exploit to say, well, God can't be all powerful because of the existence of evil. My belief is that evil exists because it's serving a purpose, and that purpose is to create the illusion of choice, the illusion of disorder, which is necessary for change. So the way heaven was before Lucifer fell, everything was perfect. There was no delay, no error, no time and space, which you understand did not yet exist. Time and space actually are kind of in between God and men. It's kind of a barrier that stands between them. Uh, my theory is that in order to create space and time, error need to be introduced into the heavenly system, and that's where Satan came in. In order to have space, space between us and God, time where there's delay, time for things to change. In heaven, before the universe was created, there was no change. Everything was perfect and remained perfect all the time. Uh, so it made it interesting to write the prologue because how do you describe uh, a timeless time? How do you describe a space that does not take up any space? Because heaven, this was before what we understand as dimensions were created. There were no three dimensions. There was no timekeeping. There was no anything. Only God and those whom he created, the spirits that surrounded him in the divine assembly. And so my theory is this part of the prologue is Satan collaborated with a group of other angels, one third of these other spirit beings. And he had been purposely tempted by God with the idea that he could create his own universe where he could be king, where he could be God, as separate from the will of the Father. But the Father's intention all along was to use Lucifer by tempting him into falling, to actually use him to create a universe which he would in the future use as a home for those spirits who remained loyal. And so it was kind of an interesting twist that it's evil thinks it's in charge of its own destiny, but it's really not. The person at the top of the strings is the Father pulling the strings. So in this way, theologically, God can maintain his sovereignty, but also evil can exist in a situation where God is in control because it's serving a purpose. In order to have change, in order to have death and life and cycles, you have to have imperfection. And that's where Satan added into the divine equation imperfection. And this led to an explosion, a release of energy, because there was an energy imbalance because of this rebellion. And this energy was stolen from God and it was released explosively into creating the universe as we now understand it, which is a combination of mostly order but also elements of chaos. The orderly elements are represented by the loyal angels who work behind the scenes to try to keep things orderly, whereas the chaotic elements are products of the fallen angels who are constantly trying to drag things down into chaos. And this creates a kind of a cycle of primarily ordered universe, but has occasional times when things become disordered, which is roughly two-thirds of the time we have order and one-third of the time we have disorder. Right now, we're in kind of a downward cycle where the fallen angels are in descendancy. But there will be a cataclysmic reassertment of order in the near future when God returns and reestablishes order. There'll be the millennium. And so you have a universe which is basically governed behind the scenes by these spirit beings who are struggling with each other for control of the universe. And this is why we see cycles in the universe. Everything's kind of a spiral, which is all the galaxies, all the way up from galaxies, all down to atoms. All of these are central objects with spirals around them. This is the angels and demons fighting for control of the universe. And the cycles we see and the patterns in nature and everything that's predictable and testable. This is the outworkings of this heavenly struggle that's taking place behind the scenes. And basically, right, they fought each other for who knows how long, I believe, in an ancient universe, until they achieved a stalemate condition to the point where it was determined that in order to break the stalemate, they had to create some proxies. And so mankind was created as a proxy environment in which the battle could be further fought and a decision made as to whose way was best, whether Jesus' way or Satan's way. And this battle would determine the outcome of the war and who would end up ruling the universe. And so you have Adam being born, but then Satan corrupting him per the pattern. God creates, Satan corrupts. And this happens over and over again throughout history until an incorruptible being was created, that is Jesus, who broke the stalemate, died for our sins and an all once for all sacrifice, and went back up to heaven. And if we believe in him, we can go back, we can return to heaven to live with him forever. But this is without that tiebreaker, we would call it an eternal battle where things are orderly most of the time, but Satan would always have his time where he was in ascendancy like we are in now. And so it was a permanent cycle which could never be broken unless you had a tiebreaker. Jesus himself coming into this, incarnating into this reality that we live in, this kind of a virtual reality, and creating a way out for us. So that is really he's broken the cycle of evil where Satan, even though he was never able to take control, he created a situation where it was impossible for the loyal angels to take under Michael to take control. So Jesus himself had to come down, be a tiebreaker, and create an overwhelming force which was necessary to break the stalemate. And so here we are near the end of this eons long battle. Jesus is about to return and break the stalemate forever, and will be taken out of this veil of sin, these fleshly clay pots, and given eternal bodies which can no longer be subject to Satan's control. And so that is kind of the basis of the prologue behind the book on the giants, is who we are, why we're here, the battle that's going on. And now we understand why the giants were created, because of the proxy war. They were fighting a proxy war between God's seed and Satan's seed. Now, Satan was unable to create his own seed because he lacked the resources and intelligence. But he was intelligent enough to modify God's original design to make it so that it was quote unquote improved upon. So that's what the giants were. They were Homo sapiens plus. I call them, in my book on the articles on the giants, I call them Homo artificialis. That is artificially manufactured mankind. Mankind has been altered. And these giants were designed not only to out-multiply, but also to militarily defeat and even...
All right, we'll be right back, everyone. That was excellently laid out, Doug. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. And like you, Doug, I'm one that ascribes to there being a huge amount of time. How much that is, really don't know, but I do believe that between Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and chapter 1, verse 2, that something occurred that led to the earth becoming without form and void, and that when you look up that the word, that it actually is alluding to a ruinous heap, and that something led to the earth becoming a ruinous heap, and that what is described in the latter chapters and the latter verses of Genesis is the recreation and the reformation of the earth, and with the firmament and everything. And so I do believe that, and I'm also going to ask you if you believe that the fall of Lucifer occurred, which I affirm this and teach it this way in my own books, that the rebel angels were cast out prior to the creation and the temptation and fall of Adam, and also before the Watchers and the incursion of the Watchers, and that when the Watchers fell during the time of Yara, that was actually a second group of angels that left their place of habitation and descended, that they mated with the daughters of Cain. So let me get you to answer that first, and then we can go from there. And also comment on, if you want to, about the gap theory and all that.
Okay. Basically, I believe that the universe was not, the fallen angels did not fall before or after the universe. The creation of the universe was a direct result of the fall. Mm-hmm. The angels, there was a war in heaven. There was incalculable amounts of energy being expended in a battle between spirits that existed at a higher level of existence. I mean, a single drop of that power could probably take out an entire galaxy. It's that much power, probably. And my belief is that in order to have an explosion of energy so vast to create an entire universe, you'd have to have some kind of a release of energy at a higher dimension. And I think that the spirit dimension is the origin point of the physical dimension.
Yes.
My belief is that uh, Satan stole the old story of Prometheus stealing fire from heaven, I believe it is.
Right.
He actually literally stole energy from God when he sought to make his own reality in his own imagination. He stole some of the glory that was due to God and kept it for himself. In the paradigm I create in the book is that basically they're arranged in a hierarchy. All these spirits are arranged in a hierarchy like a pyramid underneath the pre-incarnate Son of God is at the top. This is based on the idea that this is what will be happening at the end of time when the New Jerusalem is created. Jesus will literally be creating a new pyramid, and this actually is in the process of creating a new pyramid, a pyramid which is made out of us, of new spirits, the redeemed spirits he has created from among men. In fact, he's even said that. He said that the church is a new building which he is creating out of us, of which we are here, we are his jewels, and we are like the stones that he's using to build his new temple. He actually says this in the Bible. And so my belief is that the New Jerusalem is actually a gigantic pyramid where Jesus himself was at the top, at the apex, and unlike the profane pyramid of the Freemasons, which has Satan sitting at the top, which is a physical pyramid. Jesus is creating a spiritual pyramid, which he'll sit at the top, and this is the New Jerusalem that will be dropped down onto the new planet Earth, probably planet X, as described in Revelation 21. But I backwards extrapolated from that. If there is a new pyramid, maybe there is an old pyramid that was destroyed, because it says specifically in there, it says, no one that loves or makes a lie, no dogs, no idolaters, no sorcerers, and so forth, will be allowed into this new pyramid. And so I theorize that maybe if the fallen angels, those demons basically would not be allowed in this new pyramid. It stands to reason that maybe the whole purpose of this universe thing is that he's using it to create a brand new pyramid, because the old one was destroyed as a result of a battle between the fallen angels and the loyal angels. My theory is that there was actually a hierarchy of power, not a physical pyramid as we understand it, but a hierarchy of authorities, principalities, powers, rulers, thrones, dominions, the top of which are the archons, who manage the entire assembly. Archon is basically a word which means prince. It's translated as prince in the New Testament. It's a Greek word. And these angels are arranged in various orders and hierarchies in a pyramidal form, at the top of which sat the pre-incarnate Christ, who was ministered to by Lucifer. And Lucifer was between the assembly and Jesus was between Lucifer and the Father. And Lucifer attempted to usurp Jesus' place and take control of that power, which came up with the assembly and returned to the Father. He tried to take it for himself, take the glory for himself, but he couldn't handle it. It was too much for him. And the other 1/3 of the angels who attempted to take this power for themselves, the glory of God, they took for themselves and tried to take the glory away from God. And they couldn't handle the energy, so it ended up being released explosively and destructively. And as a result, this assembly in heaven, which is perfectly ordered and there's no error and delay and everything was in perfect communion with each other, they created a universal explosion of energy, which led to kind of an embolism in a lower dimension. In fact, it may have ended up in the creation of these lower dimensions. And the universe is spread out infinitely at infinite speed. And all these spirits were dragged down into this lower dimension, and they're trapped there still to this day. And in a process, so history has been a process of weeding out the bad spirits from the good, saving the good ones for eternal glory, and putting the bad ones in prison for final judgment at the end of time. And so the universe, the point of the universe, it wasn't just created for fun, even though it was created for God's pleasure. The purpose was to provide an environment in where the rebel angels could be judged and imprisoned, and the loyal angels rewarded for their loyalty. And we, I think, we're being created to replace the fallen angels who are being taken out of the assembly. And we'll live together with the loyal angels in this new heavenly New Jerusalem, which will descend out of the sky, a replacement pyramid for the original pyramid, which was destroyed as a result of the original divine conflict in heaven, which resulted in the creation of the universe.
Wow, that's pretty heavy, and it's in the things that I've written about. It's amazing how similar um, a lot of what you are mentioning and talking about is what I also believe and have thought about as far as the war in heaven. And I also think that with the mount of the congregation, it mentioned in with Lucifer wanting to exalt himself above the stars of God and to be as the Most High, that the reason we see all these pyramidal structures is that possibly it is because New Jerusalem or the Mount of the Congregation was in this pyramidical shape. And so what we see is Lucifer counterfeiting what he had witnessed, when he was part of the sons of God of the congregation of the mighty, as spoken about in Psalms 82. Um,
It wasn't a physical mountain like a dirt mountain.
yeah.
It was a mountain of power, a mountain of spiritual energy.
Hmm.
And if I could quote Isaiah 14:12 through 15, I actually have it as the first part of my prologue. It says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, shining star, son of the dawn?" This is my translation.
Yeah.
"How art thou cut down from the ground to the ground, you who exploited the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit in the holy place on the peak of the mountain of the congregation. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High God. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the bottom of the pit." See, this is the essence of Satan's rebellion. He wanted to replace Jesus as the one who sat on the throne. And so there was a conflict there, and that conflict resulted in a war which destroyed this heavenly mountain because it doesn't exist anymore. But there is a universe in its place. And so at least it might be there. My theory is that it was actually destroyed, and the universe was created out of the energy that was released from that. This is why the universe has elements of order. We have mathematics and geometry, which seem to echo a higher reality, which was most perfect, but it's now degraded into something less. Satan tried to steal this energy and turn it into a form that he could use to create his own reality, a greatly inferior version to that of the Father had created for them in heaven, which was perfect and unchanging. But in order to ascend to the throne and create a reality where he was God, he had to alter reality. In order to do that, he had to create his own reality. In my opinion, we actually may be living in Satan's nightmare, his mad dream of power. We're actually caught in his nightmare. This temporary thought, we're living in a single thought that has lasted for infinite amounts of time almost, but in heavenly time might be less than a second. We might be Satan's dream. You might be dreaming about it. We don't know what's actually going on at a higher level. But the point is that the mechanisms we see in nature, in my opinion, are the outworkings of the actions of these heavenly beings. And so this is why when we perform rituals, whether for good or for evil, it has certain outcomes. Whether you do good rituals, you follow the law of Moses, blessings will come. If you worship demons and make sacrifices to idols, temporary blessings followed by curses will come. This is just the way things operate, because the fallen angels are constantly looking for ways to penetrate the universe, the physical world, and operate within it in an effective way, because that was their dream. They wanted to have their own reality separate from that of God, so that's why they tried to create their own universe, stealing God's energy in order to do it. But the Father's intention was he wanted them to do that because in order to create the universe, you have to have imperfection, because perfection means no time, no space, no delay, no error. Time and space are contrary to perfection. With time, you have a delay. You have a delay in communication. You have a delay. You have death. You have suffering. And a lot of this idea actually came from Paul's description in Romans 8:38. I'll go over real quickly here. Is that my theorizing about how the universe was created and structured is based on Paul's description to the Romans in 8:38, that he is persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any creature, that is, the word creature is anything created, any physical object, not just something that's alive, shall be able to separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. What he is literally saying, and this is a radical statement, I mean, it's really radical. It's not just death or life or angels. He's also saying principalities, powers, and things present, things that exist, anything in time or space, things present or thing to come, which is time, nor height, nor depth, or any object, which is space. So he's saying angels, demons, time, and space, nothing come between us, indicating that they are between us and the Father now. But the sacrifice of Jesus bridged that gap so that when we come back, when we're resurrected, space, time, angels, and demons can no longer separate us, indicating that they're doing that now. So the principle behind my theory is that space-time was created by Satan in order to separate us from God, enslave us in a temporary virtual reality in order to control us and make himself God over us. All the angels, all the demons, all those who were born during the time of the universe, all of us, he would be God. And thus you have the description of him ascending to the Mount of God and sitting on the throne of God. He couldn't actually do it, but in his crazy attempt to do so, which I think failed, he went insane. And we're basically in his insane dream right now where he's convinced himself that he's actually God and he's actually ruling, whereas he's in the process of being defeated.
Wow, that's fascinating. And, it reminds me of the description in the Nag Hammadi codices with the demiurge and Yaldabaoth, and the creation of the visible world, the visible universes, being under the authority of the demiurge Yaldabaoth, also referenced as Saklas and Samael, the angel of death, which is interesting in its of itself because in the Targum, the translation, the Aramaic translations of the Hebrew Torah, Samael is the name of the Nakash, the serpent in the garden which beguiled Eve and impregnated her with Cain, resulting in leading to the war between the bloodlines, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. Um,
Correct.
two
Proxy war.
questions. Yes, two questions for you along the lines of, and so when the visible universes came into being, um, do you speculate that there was time when the fallen angels, the rebel angels, specifically Lucifer and the archons, that they were here and possibly creating some of these megalithic sites, perhaps, or some of these, megalithic structures aligned to the dragon lines, these ley lines, also a link to the heavens and celestials. There's all these really intricate alignments. Do you think that they were here doing those types of things before modern humanity, the modern creation of Adam and Eve, and the fall and temptation, which led to the last 6,000-7,000 years?
I think that Satan and his fallen angels, I believe when Lucifer fell, right before he did, he stole a lot of information from the heavenly record,
Mm-hmm.
information that was not meant to be known. And he stored it in this great crystal, which was known in esoteric literature as the stone of exile, the lapis exilis. And I think it was in one of the Freemasons' writings, they said that Lucifer had actually battled against Michael, and Michael defeated Lucifer by striking his crown and removing the jewel from his crown, which was the source of his power. And this stone fell to earth, and Lucifer, Satan's been looking for it ever since, because it has all the information that he stole from heaven in it. And so in my book, I talk about how basically Satan, in a rage, came down to earth searching for the stone because it had fallen from his crown, and without it, he could not have any hope of ascending to the throne, because that was most of his power. It was like Sauron in the ring. He was pretty strong on his own, but with the ring, he was really strong.
Uh-huh.
It was a force to be reckoned with. And so he's been looking for this stone of destiny all this time, which I believe in the Bible is referred to as the Zohar, I sent you some links on that as an understanding what that is. And that Sohar, I believe, is the MacGuffin, not only for my book, but for this entire history. Satan, the control of this Sohar stone, which appears in numerous guises throughout history as the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Evil, good and evil, or as there's a tree of the tree of good knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. It appears hanging from the rafters in the Noah's Ark. It's described in Genesis 6:16. It was actually like a shining stone. The translation of window is incorrect. Abraham is said to have had hold of the Zohar, which he used to heal people. And it was even said that Joseph and Moses had it at one time. And I believe, and I talk about this in my book, the horns that Moses was wearing when he came down from Mount Sinai was actually the Zohar, which is actually like a round stone with two horns on either side, which should be worn as a headdress, which gives the wearer all knowledge. Basically, it's a very dangerous object, which was once Lucifer's crown. So it's a very dangerous thing, which only persons of highest trust could be given. And so all of these people, all the patriarchs, Adam, Noah, Abraham, Joseph, Moses, and maybe even Jesus was tempted with it, but I think he rejected it because he had a greater crown waiting from heaven. They all had access to this thing, and it was necessary to use that to talk to God. And Moses was probably the last one to use it because I think the ark was used to replace this as a communications device with God. But basically, this stone of exile, which fell out of Lucifer's crown, has been the primary goal of Lucifer, and one of the reasons he created the giants, because the sons of Shem have been hiding it from him this entire time. And so he's been using the giants to try to take out the sons of Shem, the Semites, that is the Jews and Arabs and related peoples. And he created the giants to wipe out the Semites and take back the stone so he could use it to conquer and control the world. That's his goal. And I do believe that in the end times he'll achieve this goal. I talk about this in my Kindle book, The Riddle of the Sphinx, about how I believe it's actually buried underneath the Sphinx, and the Antichrist will rediscover it and use it to conquer the world.
Very fascinating. It leads me to something that I had read in a book called The Assatir, which speaks about Adam when he was cast out of paradise, exiled from paradise and banished here to the earth, that he was given 4 books. And these books it says were written on a stone, like, sort of like a crystal, or like the knowledge would be
Yes.
within a crystal.
Yes.
Um, can you?
Sapphire stone.
Yeah, exactly.
I can tell you exactly what it is.
All right, go.
They're written on sapphire stones, inside of sapphire stones, using a laser. You can use crystal, transparent crystal, to read and write data using a laser. Sapphire stone can also be used. It is believed that the Torah stones, the stones of the law that were inside of the Ark of the Covenant, were actually written on sapphires. Now, you couldn't put all that information on the outside of a stone. It would be too small to be readable. And in fact, sapphire is so hard that only diamond is harder, so I literally could not have carved anything on the face of the stone. It's impossible. Sapphire stones are only hard. The only harder thing than sapphire is diamond. And so there was something called an ancient, Solomon had hold of what was called a shamir, which it was believed it was used to create this temple, and it emitted a bright red light. And I suspect it was actually a ruby laser. And what they did was, Moses didn't create these tablets, but God's servants did, using a laser, and they used it to write data inside of tablets, which were circular, basically like hard drives, except they were made out of clear sapphire, transparent sapphire, probably artificially made. And they wrote it in like they would a typical hard drive, except this hard drive is made out of sapphire, which is a crystalline form. And it was basically a permanent, it was a form of data storage that would literally last forever. I mean, sapphires, unless you hit them with a hammer or something really hard, they will last literally through the entire universe. It's impossible. So they had a permanent storage medium, which they then put in the ark. And the Zohar, I believe, was made of the same material, sapphire stone. And probably Adam was given these books, which are actually sapphire stones, into which is written this information. He must have had a reader of some kind, an ancient equivalent of a CD player or a DVD player, which God would have had to have created for him as well. And as silly as that sounds, it makes a lot of sense, because It's the only way it could work. And in fact, the word for books in Hebrew is actually sefer. And it's the same word we get the word sapphire from. So sefer for book and sefer for sapphire, basically the same thing. In fact, book, the very basic concept of book in ancient Hebrew was actually not like a paper text or a written scroll, but it's sapphire stone. And so that
Fascinating.
powerfully confirms that the 99.9% likely it was a sapphire stone.
All right, we'll be right back for a second hour. Hold on, everyone. Welcome back, everybody, for second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen, and I'm honored to have as guest with me this evening Douglas Elwell. Really quick, just wanted to remind everybody that Revolution Radio is the largest listener-supported, commercial-free, and corporate-free radio network on the internet or even on the earth. And so there's a great way that I just recently discovered that you can support your favorite host and also get an incredible source of information. If you are interested in supporting a specific host, you can call up the studio, email, or contact us at freedomslips.com and let Nighthawk know that you would be interested in purchasing a disc of the whole entire year of your favorite shows from your favorite hosts, and that a portion of this money will actually go to support them in their efforts. Another way also is you can purchase access to the archives for $4.95 a month and download the individual shows for all the hosts from both Studios A and Studio B, which is a fabulous, fabulous deal in and of itself. And those of you that can, please do, and know that we appreciate you beforehand. Doug, I wanted to ask you a question since we're talking about the stones. Specifically, there's a mention in the scriptures as to Lucifer only having 9 stones, and that this link is possibly to the ephod, and that the 12 stones representing each of the 12 tribes of Israel, and that the priests wear these 12 stones in a particular configuration. And do you postulate that that also has something to do with tapping into knowledge source or anything of that nature?
It's a good question. In my research on the Sohar stone, I researched Hebrew understanding of the stones of the ephod and so forth. And they believe that they were actually means of communication between heaven and earth. In fact, they believe that the stones in the ephod actually shined, and maybe in a pattern to indicate yes/no answers, or even use some sort of Morse code type situation where they're actually able to make entire sentences and communicate that way. Could be that I believe that Satan was the original high priest, that he was the communicator between the intermediary between God and the earth, and he had an ephod or ephod-like device which he used to do that as well. In fact, I can go ahead and say that the high priest and all the patriarchs and those who interceded wearing the multicolored cloak or the hawk, which Moses had, a special belt, the robe that Elijah had, they all were given elements of Satan's old technology in order to communicate with God. I believe Satan actually had a robe and all kinds of other stuff that he had as part of his divine vestments, which were necessary to not only to protect his physical form, whoever he was physically possessing, but also allowed him to communicate directly with God and follow his orders. And I think that a lot of these vestments, in fact all of them, are still on earth in various places, and various holy men throughout history have been given these things in order to give them unusual powers, in order to prove the power of God over the false gods of the nations. Elijah had his cloak, Moses had his staff and a special belt. Actually, Elijah had a belt too, and possibly some other things. And so this is actually what we would call Satan, Satan's representative, which he inhabited and possessed, was wearing what we would call high technology. And Satan had created this very high technology, which is high even by modern standards, to allow him to properly administer the earth without fear of being hurt. It gave him great power and great defensive capabilities. Basically, the analogy I would use is that if you have all the Avengers together, all their superpowers are combined into one person, that's what he would be like wearing all this stuff. He's got a special belt, which can apparently made him very strong, possibly allowed him to run very fast. That might have been a source of Elijah's ability to run faster than a horse. And he also had a staff, which maybe allowed him to rain or not rain. Also the cloak, which protected him, possibly made him invisible. And the special headdress I was talking about previously, which gave him insight into all things and all knowledge. And so Satan had probably the original high priestly garments because he was the original high priest. All the priests and patriarchs and powerful men like Moses, Elijah, Joseph, Abraham had some, or possibly all, it's not clear, of these vestments and pieces of equipment that he was wearing. Originally, Satan was wearing before he had them stripped from him because of his abuse of the power that it gave him. So you can think of all the patriarchs and the high priests between Satan and Jesus as temporary fill-ins until Jesus could come to earth, live a sinless life, die on the cross, and rise again for our sins. There was a temporary means of achieving communion with God, which otherwise was impossible because of Satan's blocking of them. But Jesus was able to, and I was able to do it without the need of this technology. And I believe he was actually tempted at various points in his life with these objects, with the divine headdress, the silver stone headdress, with the staff, with the cloak. I believe actually the cloak that was put on him by, I think it was Pontius Pilate. It was probably the coat of many colors, the ketonet vestment that the high priest used to wear, which gave him protection. That might have been actually put on him as a royal robe, which he misunderstood its power. But Jesus did know its power, and he was tempted by it. If he had put on these vestments, which he was offered by Satan, and you could use these vestments to rule the world, because they would have made him invincible. He could literally rule the world, but he would have done so using Satan's technology. And he would be doing it Satan's way, using Satan's methods. But that's not why he was here. Satan's method is technological, whereas Jesus' method is spiritual.
Right.
And so he knew that he had to live and die and rise from the dead in order to take on this spiritual form, which these vestments and garments were designed by Satan to try to replicate. The spirit form will be extraordinarily powerful, but through the use of this technology, Satan was trying to replicate this ability. The like this force field he probably kind of had around him to defend himself with various types of high technology weaponry, massively powerful computers, all built into this efficient suit he was wearing. I believe when Jesus was in the wilderness, he was tempted by the ketonet, or by the Zohar stone, which Satan actually used to show him the entire earth in an instant. This thing is like a computer with a visual interface, which you can use to display on. It's a giant sapphire stone, about 20 to 22 inches in diameter, shaped like a lens. And it had all knowledge written inside of it using a laser, like I described earlier. It was basically a extraordinarily, if not infinitely powerful, ultimately powerful supercomputer, the most powerful kind of supercomputer, which he had all knowledge in, and he was able to use it as a sort of a monitoring device to watch over the earth. And he used this thing to show Jesus all the nations of the earth and everything he controlled using his device. And he said to him, you can rule over this if you just bow down and worship me. You take on this crown, my crown, and rule in my stead as basically the Antichrist. Jesus refused this because he really had a greater crown waiting for him in heaven. And also he was tempted in various times. I believe he was tempted, like I mentioned earlier, when they put that royal robe on him. This was probably the ketonet vestment, which was worn by the high priest, which protected him from the ark. If he didn't wear it, and he went before the ark would kill him. Right. So this was a protective device I suspect it was actually it created an electromagnetic force field, which protected the wearer from any harm, basically. Ketana was a head to toe garment which covered everything from your neck all the way down to your feet. And also, you're tempted with suspected belts. If you recall, John the Baptist was wearing a special belt. I suspect that was the same belt that Elijah was wearing, which is where he derived at least some of his power. And this is why partly why people said this is Elijah returned. If you can understand it, it wasn't actually physically Elijah. It was a man wearing Elijah's belt, which he used to perform these miracles. So not to despiritualize it too much, but these are things that God used to use, gave to holy men in ancient times to perform miracles until a permanent solution could be created, which was Jesus. But that was thousands of years in the future, so he gave them these technological artifacts to perform miracles and intercede on God's behalf temporarily until the permanent solution could be put together. And so Jesus was tempted with the belt because John the Baptist had the belt. He could have said, "Hand it over, John, because I'm Jesus and I should have this." He didn't say that, so John kept the belt. The cat's neck garment was taken by the Roman soldiers. There was the garment. They said it was too fine. It was a seamless garment. They said it was too fine to divide, so they threw lots for it. The lots were probably signified, or possibly actually were, the Urim and Thummim. So Jesus had an opportunity to grab this ancient helmet, the ketonet, protective garments, also the Urim and Thummim, which he could have used to communicate with God himself and do prognostication. And there's some other things in there too. I've noticed here and there, bits and pieces of the high priest's garment. Actually, he made fun of the high priest, and this was interesting. I realized what was happening when Jesus was saying, if if that when the high priest was saying to Jesus, you should not allow them to praise you as you come into the city. And he says, if they did not, the very rocks would cry out. I think what he was talking about, not rocks in the ground, but the rocks that were inside the stones, the precious stones that were on the breastplate of the high priest. Since it was originally a communications device, these stones would cry out, proclaiming praise for the Son of God, because that's what they're designed to do. And he was making fun of the high priest because basically saying, look, you're wearing this technology. You don't even know how it works. You don't even know it's technology. You're just strutting around in this thing like you're God's right hand, but you're actually an idiot because you don't even know your ancestors used to use this to talk to me. And here I am standing right here in front of you, and you don't even have a clue. Not only do you not understand the communication device that you're wearing is supposed to be used to talk to me, I'm standing over here talking to you. You don't even recognize me. You are an idiot. He said so. This was a very, very clever insult.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus said, basically, you are an idiot. You're completely clueless. And you have no right wearing that garment because you're an idiot. And so he had opportunity to take the breastplate away from the high priest. You could see where at points in his history, he had the opportunity to take this stuff for himself, but he didn't because that wasn't his destiny. But he could have done it, and he could use that stuff to conquer the world. And here's the kicker. The Antichrist will use those things to conquer the world. He will find all these things, and he will put them on, and he will become all-powerful, and he will follow Satan's advice, take away the crown, take the other garments, the ephod, the ketanets, the belt, the crown, and some other things. I still have to find them. And he'd be so invincible that he could literally conquer the world single-handedly. But it would be impractical. It would take forever. But at the head of an army, this guy would be literally invincible. It'd be like it'd be having the Ark of the Covenant, except you're wearing the Ark of the Covenant on your head and using it to obliterate absolutely everybody. Because this thing would basically set out intensely powerful lasers that would burn through anything, maybe hundreds or even thousands of lasers at once. And this is what the Ark of the Covenant, this was how we used to wipe out entire armies. It's to set up powerful lasers and just cut them all in half and destroy them. That was my theory, because it says in the rabbinical commentaries, red threads would come out of the Ark of the Covenant, and as the what looked like red threads came out of the Ark of the Covenant, and would burn snakes and bushes and thorn bushes ahead of the advancing armies of Israel, so as to clear a path for them. Red thread of fire could only mean a laser,
Mm,
because fire would not travel in a straight line like that, but a laser would. And
right.
so, because we have to have a laser to read and write to a sapphire stone in order to write data inside the stone, and a red thread is a perfect description of what a red laser looks like. That's what it must have been. That's why I'm saying I'm totally confident in it.
Uh-huh.
If there was an Ark of the Covenant, it must have been using lasers. And you can see if you try to open the Ark of the Covenant, it hits you with a laser. That's how it was defending itself. If you come near the Ark of the Covenant, you're not properly attired for it, its automatic defense system would kick in and fry you. And that's why the priests were sometimes killed, because they would get in there without the proper vestments or without proper incense or whatever, and zap, burn a hole in them, they're dead. And that's the technology that we're working with. And so
Fascinating.
I put this all together, and this will be in the book, as not, the Giants were not only all about being strong, but they're also highly intelligent,
Uh-huh.
and were able to figure out this technology and use it. And so part of their advantage they had over other humans is what they were able to create and use high technology in their wars and their battle against the sons of Shem, or the sons of Seth in the Old Testament,
Right.
and defeated them through not only their superior size and strength, ability to propagate, but also their high technology.
Well, this leads me to another question. I'm going to actually just read this passage and then ask you the question. This is about the sacred garments, is what it says. And it says this in chapter 18 of a book called The Writings of Abraham. Before the death of Ham, the sacred garments were given secretly by him to his son Cush. Cush also kept them hidden, and in his old age gave them unto his son Nimrod. And when Nimrod was 20 years of age, he put on the garments, and he derived great strength and power from them. Um,
Yes.
and supposedly before this time, Adam was given these garments by the Most High God, and then he had passed them on to Enoch, and Enoch had passed them on to Noah, and then
Right.
Noah had them in the ark, but they were stolen by Ham, and then they were given to, the sons of Canaan, which were the children of Cain after the
Yes.
flood.
Yes.
And so, have you written about these sacred garments, or can you comment on that?
I thank you for reminding me. I forgot to include that. I will do that. This, the uncovering the nakedness of Noah was not about sexuality. He stole the ketonet from him. He was wearing the full length garment to protect himself,
Uh-huh.
and he stole it from him while he was sleeping. And that is why they were talking about the curse of Cain. And he tried to steal the kingship because the ketonet was a protective garment meant to protect the king. So if you steal the protective garment, and this is the same thing that Joseph was wearing, this coat of many colors,
Yes.
same thing. In fact, it's even called a ketonet in the Book of Genesis. This is the Ketzonet's pasim, the Ketzonet, or the coat of many colors. Or actually, pasim means parts, so it's a coat of many parts. It wasn't just the coat; it was actually these other things I was talking about. It was the coat, the belt, probably the staff, the breastplate, probably the helmet as well, and probably some other things. In fact, my theory is that you have in ancient Egypt, and the Egyptians wear this grouping of garments that Ham stole, or Ham stole from Noah, was that he understood that this was actually a combination of different parts that work together as kind of a unit. In fact, the word for a knight's armor and weapons and everything was actually called a kit, which I think was actually derived from the word ketzonet, which in ketnet is not just the covering, it's kind of the entire package of everything that the priest or whoever is wearing in order to protect themselves. Um, yeah, the myth of Osiris. I think the myth of Osiris is actually in Egyptian mythology. It's actually a description of how the sons of Seth, not the god Seth, but the person Seth, who was later turned into this diabolical being by the Egyptians who hated the Sethites, said he had cut Osiris into 12, I think it was 13 pieces, and hid
Mm-hmm.
the various pieces all around the world. Now, I think what he was talking about, it was this garment, which was actually made of 12 pieces. And this garment, this Ketzinah Pasim, this garment of many pieces, was actually spread out and hidden in various places because in order to make sure that no one could wear them like Nimrod again because they made him too powerful. He was unaccountable tyrant who could not be killed, and also prolonged his life. So you basically had a tyrant who not only could not die of violence or disease, but also of old age. He would live for hundreds and hundreds of years. In fact, the patriarchs who had been given the Zohar stone and the other garments, the robe, the staff, and everything else, lived for close to 1,000 years because it says in the rabbinical commentaries they slept in the light of the Zohar, which renewed them every evening, so they didn't age like everyone else. So that if you recall in the Old Testament, it says that the patriarchs lived for almost 1,000 years. It
Right.
doesn't say anyone else did. It said just them. We assumed they lived for a long time back then, but the fact is only the patriarchs have said that, and because the rabbinical commentaries believe it's because of the Zohar, which was a giant sapphire stone which stood on a pole, not unlike basically like the staff of Ra in Raiders of the Lost Ark, except the stone is not small; it's much larger. It's about the size of a basketball or larger, and it's shaped like a lens made of clear sapphire. And they slept in the light of this thing, and it would basically rejuvenate their body every night, probably through lasers. My guess is that this thing, if it is could use lasers to read and write to its interior, a typical write speed of I think thousands of times per second or hundreds of thousands of times per second of a typical a modern CD-ROM drive. This thing could probably output. It could probably not only direct lasers into its interior to do writing, it could also direct them outside to affect its environment. So I suspect that this thing could actually reach out and touch anything with these lasers, and that's how it manipulated its environment. And probably what it did is it used laser surgery to cut out cancerous cells, dead cells, and allow living cells to renew themselves. So basically, anytime an old cell or a dead cell showed up, it would scan the patriarchs with its lasers, burn up all the old dead stuff, and leave only the good stuff. And so they basically lived forever, as long as they had this stone, or for a very long time. Eventually, old age would catch up to them, but effectively, they could live forever as long as they use this thing. And also possibly the consumption of monatomic gold. People have theories about that, which I think was probably the manna in the wilderness. And I talk about that a little bit too, but the giants are also trying to take the secrets of heaven, which included not only the Zohar stone, but also the manna, which prolonged life. And this is why Adam and Eve are thrown out of the garden, because they had access to the tree of life, which is basically a huge pile of monatomic gold. And this was used to power the tree of life, which was the Zohar stone, which stood on a pole, so it was one unit. Um, those are my theories, and I believe that the myth of Osiris is actually a description of how this garment, which was not a man or a god, but actually like you can imagine a suit of armor standing up by itself on a stand.
Uh-huh.
That's what Osiris was. That's what Osiris was. He was an empty suit of armor, which looked like a man or a god, but it was actually armor like an outfit that someone could put on to become like a god. It gave you like godlike powers. But the descendants of Seth, later known as the Semites, took apart this suit of armor and put its various parts or various parts of the world, hid it various places, so that no one person can get their hands on it and become a tyrant like Nimrod had been and others. And I believe in the end times, and probably right now, in fact, this is probably the reason we have so many armies all over the world, just like Hitler was searching for the Ark of the Covenant in Raiders of the Lost Ark. We have people all over the world searching for pieces of the 12 pieces of this Osiris armor. And the Antichrist will put it all together and put it on and to proclaim himself God when he's standing in the Holy Temple wearing this suit, wearing the Zohar headdress, which is exactly the same thing that we see on the head of Hathor. If you're familiar with that Egyptian goddess, this round red disc with flanked up by horns on either side. That's what the Zohar is. And this explains why Moses was described as having horns when he came down from Mount Sinai. He was wearing this thing on his head. He was actually, that's how he had that power. God gave this to him, this crown, this old crown of Satan. Said, okay, I can trust you. You've proven me I can trust you. Wear this crown. And he says to him, behold, I've made you like a god before Pharaoh. And what do you mean? It wasn't that you were just like this powerful guy. If you put on this crown, you literally become reincarnate in the eyes of the Egyptians. So if he walks in to the Egyptian courts wearing this crown on his head, it's as if Ray came out of the desert, their God, and said to them, "Do what I say, or I'm going to kill all of you." And then when they refused to release the Israelites, he proceeded to do that very thing, using the Zohar to achieve that goal. The goal of the Zohar was used to curse the Egyptians and cause the plagues.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Well, we're almost to the next break. Doug, can you go ahead and give out your website and contact information, and we'll go into your book again when we return from break.
Yes. Main site is mysteriousworld.com. That's www.mysteriousworld.com. That is for the Giants articles, and also planet-x.info for Planet X.
All right. Thank you. Hold on for final segment, everyone. All right. Welcome back, everybody, for final segment. Doug, I just want to give you a chance to go where you would like to and covering the contents of your book. I know everybody in the chat room is fascinated and just blown away by, everything you've already been speaking about. So please continue with the story. Doug, you there, brother?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay, no worries.
When it comes down, Satan came down from heaven. He brought down with him heavenly technology, which he stole from heaven, which he wanted to use in order to rule over the people of Earth, rule over Earth, all the universe. And he created a special garment specifically designed to make whatever person he inhabited, possessed, interact with the Earth invincible. And so this included his garments, the headdress, Zohar headdress, the breastplate, belt, staff, and some other things. Probably 12 or 13 pieces in total. And this allowed him basically to be invulnerable to any attack, most powerful ability to attack and destroy others on a massive scale. In fact, it was interesting when I was writing the book, Mysterious World Ireland, the section I wrote, I was looking into some of the ancient times of Ireland, and I found a very interesting story called the Battle of Moytura, where a group of people known as the Fomorians, basically Germanic peoples, came from Germany, sailed to Western Ireland and did battle with the Tuatha De Danann, who lived in Ireland at that time. This was probably around 1000 BC or so. And it was interesting because the Witch King was called the Wizard King of the Fomorians, a man named Balor, the Evil Eye, was described as wearing on his head this great red eye, out of which came this fire so powerful that it could destroy entire armies in a single glance. I find that very interesting because it sounded exactly like the Eye of Re described in Egyptian mythology, which had the ability to do the very same thing. And it also gave its wearer the ability to see long distance, even have great knowledge and so forth. And my theory was that this is one of those sapphire stones we discussed, set in between two horns in a kind of a helmet apparatus, so that whoever wore it had like a direct brain interface between this computer-like stone and their own mind. It could actually be used to transmit data directly to their brain, writing it directly to the brain, making learning much easier. And this explains why Moses could learn all the mysteries of the temple and how to build the temple on the Mount Sinai in only 40 days. It would have taken somebody years or decades to learn all this stuff. But he figured it out in 40 days, and this is probably how he did it. I don't know if you're familiar. You've probably seen all the original Star Trek episodes, the original series. There was a episode called Spock's Brain, in which this very Hathor-like alien woman came onto the bridge of the Enterprise, took Spock with her, and basically, in order to take his brain and use it as part of a central computer complex, because the old brain was dying. And it was interesting is that she was not particularly intelligent, but when she wore this special helmet, which directly injected information into her brain and taught her how to be very wise, it was basically programming her and using her to achieve this goal of achieving, capturing Spock and taking his brain away from him. The episode is called Spock's Brain from the original series, and it was interesting because the episode was framed, and I think Roddenberry used these stories to talk about esoteric stories, like the situation that was at the Hathor Temple.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a Hathor Temple right by the mountain called Serbet al-Qadim in the Sinai Peninsula, which is one of the candidates for Mount Sinai. And there's a Hathor Temple right by there, like maybe a mile or two away. My theory is that Roddenberry was communicating through the story that he felt that the Hathorites had misused this ancient technology, this ancient Sohar stone, as a means of enslaving men and kind of taking over the Serbet al-Qadim temple, which housed an ancient temple of El Shaddai before the Egyptians conquered it and destroyed it and created the Hathor temple in its place. And so El Shaddai, it would appear that the form of God, the God of Mount Sinai, that Moses met with, he was once king of that mountain, but it was co-opted by the Hathorite priests of Egypt. And so when the Egyptians, when the Israelites attacked the mountain and the Amalekite guards, they were actually attacking a group of peoples who were basically giant Germanic mercenaries who were especially tasked to guard the Hathor temple at Serbet al-Qadim and Serbet itself, which I believe was actually a massive gold repository like Fort Knox for ancient Egypt. And so the Amalekites were actually ancient Germanic giants who had been hired as mercenaries to guard the temple. And the Israelites were used to destroy them because they were spirit warriors, whereas the Amalekites were more physical. But they outnumbered the Amalekites and they had the Holy Spirit with them, so they defeated the Amalekites. And that was the source of an ongoing battle. God said of the Amalekites, I'll war with them with every generation. The battle between the Jews and the Germans during World War II was another episode of that Amalekite semi-battle. It's been ongoing for ages. But anyway, I believe that one of the ancient priestesses of Hathor wore this headdress, and it gave her supernatural seeming powers, where actually it was just high technology. And she was able to use that to conquer and control that region. And that's where the myth of the goddess Hathor came from. So it was not actually a goddess, but a human priestess wearing this device on her head, which gave the godlike powers. And I think Gene Roddenberry in his episode Spock's Brain was trying to communicate this concept that Hathor was actually a human being, a human woman, who was given exceptional powers by this machine-like, computer-like device, which made her extremely intelligent. And it was interesting in the episode that the men and women were actually separated. The women lived downstairs in this high technology environment underground, and on the surface, the men lived like these cave animals with axes, like the Amalekites. I thought that was very interesting. I get into that a little bit in the book, and how it was interesting that there was a Hathor temple right by one of the candidates for the Mount Sinai, and the Hathor temple actually had a lot of implements that could be used and were necessary for the use of creating objects like the Ark of the Covenant, the lampstand, the table of showbread. In fact, at Serbet al-Qadim, this mountain, it's a twin-peaked mountain, and which looks like a pair of breasts, and it's probably the reason the Hathor temple was put by there, because the Grand Tetons and the American, the American mountains. Same kind of concept. I think they probably put this Hathor temple, who was a fertility goddess, right by these mountains, because they believe this twin-peaked mountain was actually a symbol of fertility for the goddess. Whereas actually, God saw it as his heavenly mountain and the contact point between himself and the earth. And so there was this conflict between the worshippers of El Shaddai, which Shaddai is literally the word breasts. Shad means breast in ancient Hebrew. Shaddai is like a plurality. And so God had authority over this breast mountain, which looked like breast, which was kind of a symbolic of a woman. It was like his wife. Whereas Hathor represented the wanton woman who was separate from God, and like a feminist version of a wife who rebelled. And so when you have this interesting concept where the Israelites are like patriarchalists who are coming back to conquer this wanton feminist woman guarded by these paid mercenaries who are under her control, and take back control of this mountain and they're sitting at the foot of this mountain, kind of like God's heavenly wife, symbolized by the Twin Peak Mountain. And right nearby is this Hathor temple, which they've just basically broken down. And in fact, the Hathor temple was destroyed around that time archaeologically. So the Israelites came in, defeated the Amalekites, broke down and destroyed the temple, and also retook Serebet al-Kadim, the mountain of God. And there they found that Sohar, which the Hathorites had been using to dominate the people nearby and control the area. Now God gave it to Moses and used it to teach him the law and how to create all the tabernacle. And conveniently located nearby was an advanced, actually in the mountain itself was a refinery. The only one of two in the ancient world, the only one was in Babylon. There and in Babylon. In my mind, that's a proof that's Mount Sinai, because you couldn't have created these tabernacle furnishings without a smelter, a refinery, to refine the gold and be melted down and refined to the point where it could be used to create these implements. And there was also nearby in the Hathor temple all kinds of workshops and tools for cutting stone, because there was also vast turquoise mines nearby. In fact, Hathor was also called the Lady of Turquoise, because right by her temple were large amounts of turquoise, which was used all over the world, particularly in Egyptian jewelry. And so they had these workshops full of sophisticated tools and workplaces, which would have been perfect places to create the implements of the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, and all the rest of it. They couldn't have done it in the wilderness because it lacks sufficient heat to properly refine the gold. You can melt it, but you can't refine it well, and cast it and work it. But at the mountain of God, Serebet al-Kadim, this Hathor temple is also associated with a very, very advanced workshop area, kind of an industrial area. And even more interesting, at the heart of this Hathor temple, the very beginning of it, which was built on over generations, was a cave which it was believed a man originated in. My theory is that is the cave of treasures, the cave in which Adam and Eve were sent after they were cast down from the heavenly mountain. The heavenly mountain that they were cast out of, and the Garden of Eden was believed to be a mountain in Ezekiel 28, I believe, described as a mountain, a physical mountain. And it says they were cast down from the mountain, and the cave of treasures, and I think these other traditions you mentioned say that Adam and Eve were put into a cave nearby the foot of the mountain. This was probably the first place where Adam and Eve lived, and since that time, the temples were built from that. And if you look at the Hathor temples at Serebet al-Kadim, they were added onto over years and years by various pharaohs. But the original temple of the original deity was a cave in which El Shaddai was worshipped. And the Hathor temple was built up later, once the El Shaddai priests were conquered and the area taken away from them by what I believe was a combined Amalekite and Egyptian army, took control of that area and took control of the Sohar temple most importantly. And when the Amalekite priestess wore on her head, she was given all knowledge, and Satan entered into her and took control of her and used her to conquer that region and control it. Probably a very brutal dictator. I suspect she also enslaved the Amalekites in sinister ways, which are too complicated to get into now. But I talk about it in the book.
Well, can you also? Well, I was just going to say, and also, Doug, there's like some kind of squeaking noise coming from where you are. Sounds like a duck or something. But anyways,
it's my rocking chair.
Oh, okay, right on. But anyways, I was going to ask you about. I guess you cover in your book too the war between the sons of Seth and the giants, and also the sons of Cain throughout the. Do you follow it throughout the scripture? Like even with the harvest being the wheat and the tares, the goat and the sheep, and do you conclude it in that manner, or how do you?
Right now, it's structured to go throughout the time of David.
Uh-huh.
David pretty much finished off the majority of what remained with the giants.
Right.
There's not much going on after that. But I do talk about Gog and Magog, the descendants of Japheth, and how they ruled over the area north And I do talk, yeah, I talk about some giants in the world relatively recently. And I'll probably talk all the way up to the Germanic giants of the Nazi period, the giants that they were trying to rebreed and recreate a new race of giants. But the actual end times, I'll talk about in a separate book.
Excellent. Well, you mentioned modern sightings of giants. Can you elaborate?
No, giants in which may come back in modern times. I don't know if there are modern sightings, even though we're seeing
Okay.
more and more. We're seeing more and more like wrestlers and basketball players, really, really tall people
Uh,
who are remnants, genetic remnants of the giants. I was looking at this Indian guy recently, an Indian wrestler. I forget his name. He was absolutely huge. He looks just like a classic giant, all the way down to the huge protruding chin and all the rest. But the great Kanai or something like that. Maybe you've heard of him. I'll look it up here real quick.
okay.
But
And
yeah,
the
it's
reason
good.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say the reason I asked that is I this past Saturday I did an interview with Timothy Alberino, and he was talking about some of the work that he's done with Steve Quell on the True Legends, and he made mention about their one of their upcoming documentaries is actual discussion and presenting evidence of even giants alive in this day and age, and I'm not talking just, like genetic, like the real six finger, six toed, double sets of teeth. Like, did you ever hear the story of one of the special forces getting in conflict with one of these giants in Afghanistan and having to kill him?
Uh, I've heard about Steve Creel talking about special forces came up with like a 12-foot tall giant who literally ripped the heads
Yeah,
off of man, ate them and stuff like that. It was interesting. It's possible
yeah,
there are some giant remnants here and there living in isolated places. Um, there are still places on the earth we really even haven't explored very much.
right.
Could be they're still hiding there to this day. It's entirely possible. Or they could be living underground. Who knows? There could be space colonies waiting to invade at any time. People think that some may have escaped Earth um, using their high technology and what we call rocket ships. So who knows what actually happened in the world before the flood? There are allusions to high technology, and if they achieved at least the level of technology we have, they could easily escape into space to fight another day.
Well, there's also mention, like in a book called The Cave of Treasures, they talk about giant tribes having been locked and imprisoned within the interior of the earth,
Mhm.
and how they're to be released at the end of days, as maybe perhaps with the release of the Locust Army. I don't know, but there are passages which reference that kind of thing.
Yeah, so probably they're being held in chains of darkness till the last day, when they'll be put to use again in order to achieve God's goals, whatever they may be. You
Hmm.
have to have a bad guy. Remember, you have to have a bad guy in order to make a good guy look good. My theory is that the father is creating an army worthy of being defeated by his son.
Right, right. Yeah, I could fully see that. Well, we've got about 8 minutes remaining, so I want to give you a chance to cover anything of interest, whether it's in connection to your book or not, or any kind of fascinating story or tale that you'd like to share, or anything intriguing.
Oh, it's I'm going to finish it up this summer. I'm going to force myself to do it. I found out some time.
Excellent.
So I've been very very busy with a number of things right now. I have some a little bit of leisure time I'm going to use to finally finish this. And I'm looking at this book I've been writing off and on over the last several years. Poor Tom Horn's been waiting forever, but I'll finally get it done this year. And he's very patient.
Right on.
Um, but we'll get that done this year. It'll be awesome. I'll amaze people with my crazy ideas, and hopefully we'll get some discussion going.
Uh-huh.
And you'll be surprised just how plausible some of these strange ideas are once you actually get into the details. And we'll find that truth is indeed stranger than fiction.
Absolutely. In your work also, are you going to be referencing like sources that and are what kind of sources are you using if indeed you're going to be sharing that kind of thing?
Mainly sources from history about the giants of the Europe and giants of the Middle East, giants of Asia. There'll be a degree of discussing various tribes, but it's not a laundry list of all the giants who exist. What it is an explanation of why the universe was created, as a prologue for why the giants were created,
Mm-hmm.
the ongoing proxy war between the sons of Adam, the sons of Seth, and the sons of Cain, and how uh, why it's happening, how it is today, and where it's going to end up in terms of who's going to win the battle. And it gives us a much better understanding of not only the beginning but also the end times and what will be about to happen is about to happen when Satan plays his trump card.
Excellent. Any mention as to the garden parable, Eve's eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the connections between Cain, the possibility of the fruit being her beguilement, impregnation with Cain, anything along those lines?
Probably what happened was that in a typical alien abduction scenario, because the aliens are obviously demons. Um, he took Eve, took one of her eggs, genetically modified it, and reimplanted it, and then just like the aliens do, and then Adam was allowed to impregnate her, and that seed was two-thirds human, one-third divine, just like actually Gilgamesh is one-third human, two-thirds divine, I think. But that's why you have a three-part divinity divided into thirds. It's because you have Adam, Eve, and Satan as the parents. And in other words, Satan has Cain had two daddies or two mommies, or two, however you want to say it, plus a dad or mom. He
Mm-hmm.
had three parents, not two. That's why he was different, because he had the actually genetic admixture of three different people, or to be more accurate, one genetically altered egg plus one normal sperm, uh, created a person who was exceptionally with exceptional abilities, but it was also fatally flawed in his spiritual essence.
Well, let me ask you this then, as far as Cain and his being hybrid, maybe genetically different, do you think that that's what led to uh, the Genesis 6, where because it mentions in the Kebra Nagas that the Watchers that they actually mated with the daughters of Cain, and that it's a specific reference to them. And my postulation is that um, it became a possibility only because of what happened in Genesis chapter 3.
Yeah, Cain was the first of the giants, possibly an experiment to see what would happen if they altered the DNA. And they're probably in a process of perfecting the giants over time, getting better and better, larger, stronger, more intelligent, more capable, more beautiful. In every way, they were meant to be more attractive and better, quote unquote, than typical Homo sapiens created by God. But I think that the real problem with them is, and I talked about this in my articles, is bigger, faster, stronger is not necessarily better, because in the long term, the race goes to the most efficient form, not the strongest one. And so over time, humanity won out because God's design for humanity won because they were more efficient. They fit in more effectively with nature. They didn't have a need to conquer it. They could live in a degree of balance with it. Whereas the giants would routinely conquer, or designed to conquer and control, they are incapable of sustaining themselves through agriculture or hunting or any kind of real trade or business. They were just basically giant parasites who fed off of the work and industry of others. And once they ran out of food, they stole all the food of the people who worked for a living. They're lazy parasites and arrogant. They were not good people, even though they're glorious.
Hmm.
They're also extraordinarily self-centered and kind of useless. And so basically imagine millions of giant cannibalistic, parasitic uber jerks who are completely self-centered people, conquering the world, taking all your stuff, eating all your food, eating your pets. And then once they ran out of food, they started eating your children, then they'd eat you. That's what they were. They were
Hmm.
hostile parasites who destroyed everything. And then once they destroyed everything, they went crazy and killed themselves. They were like human time bombs designed to destroy all life and all God's creation.
Yeah, sort of like, well, the New World Order, they're not giants, but they got that kind of schizoid, self centered, me type of
Yes.
personality and nature. So,
Giants were naturally psychotic by nature.
Yeah.